A young woman walks into a failing tech startup, ready to prove herself in her first corporate role. But when she proposes a radical idea that could save the company from bankruptcy, the VP of operations dismisses her as naive and unqualified. He goes further, attempting to steal her proposal and present it as his own to the board. But when the emergency board meeting is called and the truth comes out about who she really is, the entire room falls silent. What happened in that boardroom that made a 15-year veteran realize he just made the biggest mistake of his career? Let's find out. But before we dive in, comment below where you're watching from. And if you enjoy this tale of underestimation and vindication, don't forget to subscribe. The offices of Apex Innovations occupied the 7th floor of a glass tower in downtown Seattle. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, you could see the gray waters of Puget Sound and the distant Olympic Mountains. It was the kind of space designed to impress investors. Modern furniture, exposed brick walls, a fully stocked kitchen with craft coffee, and motivational quotes painted in sleek fonts across conference room walls. But beneath the polished surface, Apex was dying. The company had burned through $80 million in venture capital over 3 years, and their flagship product, a project management platform called FlowState, was losing users every quarter. Morale was low, layoffs were rumored, and the founders were desperately seeking a buyer before the money ran out entirely. Into this pressure cooker walked Maya Chen on a crisp Monday morning in October. At 26, she looked even younger, with her oversized cardigan, minimal makeup, and the nervous energy of someone on their first day. She clutched a worn leather notebook as she stepped off the elevator, her eyes taking in the sleek office with a mix of excitement and apprehension. Maya had been hired as a junior product analyst, a mid-level position that paid decently but carried little authority. Her resume was impressive, a degree in computer science from Stanford, 2 years at a well-regarded consulting firm. But in the hierarchy of Apex, she was entering near the bottom. She would report to the VP of operations, gather data, attend meetings, and hopefully learn the ropes of the tech industry. What nobody at Apex knew was that Maya Chen was not who she appeared to be. 6 months earlier, Maya's late grandmother had passed away, leaving her an unexpected inheritance, $42 million from decades of shrewd real estate investments. Maya, grieving and unsure what to do with sudden wealth, had done something unusual. Instead of the usual routes, index funds, property, safe investments, she'd hired a financial advisor to find struggling tech companies with potential. Apex Innovations had caught her attention. She'd studied their metrics, interviewed former employees, and seen something others had missed. The core technology was sound, but the business model was wrong. So Maya had made a bold move. Through a shell company and several legal layers designed to preserve anonymity, she'd purchased a controlling stake in Apex, 52% of the company, for $28 million. The founders, desperate for cash, had agreed to the deal without ever meeting the mysterious investor. The purchase agreement included one unusual clause. The investor had the right to remain anonymous for up to 1 year while observing company operations. Maya wanted to see the company from the inside before revealing herself. She wanted to understand the culture, the problems, the people. So she'd applied for this junior role under her real name, passed through a standard interview process. And now, here she was, a 26-year-old majority owner pretending to be an entry-level employee. As she walked toward her assigned desk, a tall man in his early 40s intercepted her. He had salt and pepper hair styled with too much gel, an expensive watch, and the confident stride of someone used to being the most important person in the room. "You must be the new analyst," he said, extending his hand without smiling. "Richard Thornton, VP of Operations. You'll be reporting to me." "Maya Chen," she replied, shaking his hand. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Thornton." "Richard is fine," he said, though his tone suggested it wasn't really fine. "Let me be clear about expectations. We're in a critical period. I don't have time to handhold, so you'll need to figure things out quickly. Understood?" "Absolutely," Maya said. "Good. Your desk is over there. It will get you set up. Weekly team meeting is Wednesdays at 9. Don't be late." He turned and walked away before she could respond. Maya made her way to her desk, a small workspace in an open-plan area filled with other junior employees. As she set down her bag, a friendly face appeared. A woman in her 30s with bright red hair and a warm smile extended her hand. "Welcome to the madness. I'm Sophie Martinez, Senior Product Manager. Don't let Richard intimidate you. He's like that with everyone." "Thanks," Maya said, genuinely grateful. "Is it always this tense?" Sophie lowered her voice. "It's worse than usual. We're basically circling the drain. There's a board meeting in 6 weeks, and if we don't show progress, they're selling us for parts. Everyone's updating their resumes." Maya nodded, absorbing this. "What went wrong?" "That's the million-dollar question," Sophie said. "FlowState was supposed to revolutionize project management, but we're competing against giants like Asana and Monday.com. We can't win on their terms." Over the next 2 weeks, Maya immersed herself in Apex's operations. She attended meetings, analyzed user data, and most importantly, listened. What she discovered confirmed her initial hypothesis. Apex was trying to be a general-purpose project management tool, but the market was saturated. However, their underlying technology, particularly their AI-assisted workflow optimization engine, was genuinely innovative. They just weren't selling it to the right customers. During this time, Maya also got to know Richard Thornton better. He was a 15-year veteran of the tech industry, having held leadership positions at 3 previous companies. He was smart, driven, and absolutely convinced of his own expertise. He had a habit of dismissing ideas from junior employees, often cutting them off mid-sentence in meetings. He particularly seemed to enjoy demonstrating his superiority over Maya. "That's not how enterprise software works," he'd say when she asked questions. "You'll understand when you have more experience," he'd condescend when she offered observations. Maya absorbed these interactions quietly, taking notes in her worn leather notebook. She watched how Richard operated, how he took credit for others' ideas, how he blamed downward when things went wrong, how he'd built a small faction of loyal followers who protected him in exchange for preferential treatment. But she also saw his fear. In unguarded moments, when he thought no one was watching, Maya caught Richard staring at his computer screen with barely concealed panic. He was tied to Apex's fate as much as anyone, and if the company went under, his career would take a serious hit. 3 weeks into her tenure, Maya worked late one evening, analyzing customer churn data. She discovered something fascinating. Apex was losing general customers rapidly, but a tiny subset of users, specifically medical research labs, had remarkably high retention and engagement. These labs were using FlowState's AI features to optimize clinical trial workflows, and they loved it. Maya dug deeper, interviewing several of these customers. What she found was a potential goldmine. The medical research industry was desperate for AI-powered workflow tools that could handle the complexity of clinical trials. Current solutions were outdated, clunky, or prohibitively expensive. If Apex pivoted to serve this niche exclusively, rebranding, refocusing sales efforts, and enhancing features for this specific use case, they could own an untapped market. She spent the weekend building a comprehensive proposal. Market analysis, revenue projections, feature requirements, a complete strategic pivot plan. By Monday morning, she had a 30-page document that could save the company. The question was, what should she do with it? Maya arrived early Wednesday for the weekly team meeting, her proposal printed and bound. She decided to present it to Richard first, professionally, through proper channels. Despite his condescension, she wanted to give him the opportunity to champion it. The conference room gradually filled with the product and operations teams, about 12 people in all. Richard entered last, carrying his laptop and a large coffee, and sat at the head of the table. "Let's make this quick," he began. "Updates. Sophie, you first." The meeting proceeded with status reports, each person sharing updates on their respective projects. When it came to Maya's turn, she took a breath. "I've been analyzing our user retention data," she said, "and I've identified a pattern I think could be significant." "Go on," Richard said, barely looking up from his laptop. "We have a small cohort of medical research labs using flow state, and their engagement metrics are 3 times higher than our general user base. I think there's an opportunity to pivot our focus to clinical trial workflow management. It's an underserved market with—" Richard held up his hand. "Maya, I appreciate the initiative, but we've discussed this territory before. Medical's too niche. We need scale." "But the market analysis shows—" "What you're missing," Richard interrupted, his tone patronizing, "is that venture-backed companies need total addressable markets in the billions. Medical research is a fraction of that. This is why experience matters. You're thinking small." Sophie shifted uncomfortably. A few others looked down at their notes. Maya felt heat rising to her face, but she kept her voice steady. "I've actually prepared a full analysis. If I could just share the numbers." "I'm sure you worked very hard on it," Richard said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "But right now we need to focus on execution, not exploration. Email me your notes and I'll take a look when I have time. Next update?" Maya sat back, her proposal still in front of her. The meeting continued, but she barely heard it. She'd been dismissed publicly, without Richard even looking at her work. After the meeting, Sophie caught up with her in the hallway. "For what it's worth, I think you might be onto something," she said quietly. "Richard he doesn't like being shown up, especially by new people." "I wasn't trying to show him up," Maya said. "I was trying to help save the company." "I know, but Richard sees everything as a zero-sum game. Someone else's win is his loss." That evening, Maya sat in her small apartment, staring at her proposal. She could reveal herself now, walk into the office tomorrow as the majority owner and force the pivot. But that felt wrong, like using a nuclear option before exhausting other approaches. She'd wanted to earn respect on merit, to prove the idea was sound before leveraging her position. She decided to try once more, differently. She'd send Richard the full proposal via email with all her research, giving him the weekend to review it properly. Maybe in writing, without an audience, he'd see the value. Friday afternoon, she sent the email. "Richard, attached is the market analysis and strategic pivot proposal we briefly discussed. I believe this could significantly improve our position before the board meeting. I've included financial projections, customer interviews, and a 90-day implementation roadmap. Would love your thoughts. Best, Maya." Monday morning came, no response. Tuesday, silence. Wednesday, at the weekly team meeting, Richard had an announcement. "I've been doing some thinking," he said, standing at the whiteboard with unusual energy. "I believe we need a strategic pivot. We've been too broad in our focus. I've identified a high-potential niche market, medical research and clinical trial management." Maya's breath caught. Sophie's eyes widened, glancing at Maya. Richard continued, completely comfortable. "I've spent the past week analyzing our user data and conducting market research. There's a significant opportunity here. I'll be presenting a full strategic plan to the board next week." He went on, describing Maya's exact analysis, her market research, even using some of her specific language. He never mentioned her name. Maya sat frozen, her mind racing. She looked around the table. Most people seemed engaged, interested. They had no idea. Only Sophie knew, and her face had gone red with anger on Maya's behalf. After the meeting, Maya walked directly to Richard's office. She knocked, entered, and closed the door. "That was my research," she said quietly. Richard looked up from his computer, his expression neutral. "I'm sorry?" "The medical pivot. The market analysis, the clinical trial focus, that was from my proposal. The one I emailed you Friday. Richard leaned back in his chair, lacing his fingers together. Maya, you sent me some preliminary notes. I appreciated the input, which sparked my own investigation. But the strategic work, the actual business planning, that's VP-level thinking. You contributed data. I built the strategy. I sent you a 30-page proposal with complete financial projections. And I considered your data points when developing my plan, he said smoothly. This is how corporations work. Junior people contribute inputs. Senior people make strategic decisions. If you want credit for every piece of data that influences a decision, you'll be disappointed. That's not how this works. Maya felt her composure cracking. You're stealing my work. Richard's expression hardened. I'm going to give you some advice because I actually do want you to succeed here. This attitude, coming into a company at a junior level and expecting to drive strategy, it's not going to serve you. You need to understand your place in the hierarchy. You provide analysis when asked. Leadership makes decisions. If you can't accept that dynamic, this might not be the right environment for you. So you're just going to present my proposal to the board as your own? I'm going to present a strategic pivot that I've developed, which was informed by various data sources, including some preliminary work you did. And honestly, Maya, if you make an issue of this, you're going to look naive and difficult. No one likes someone who can't be a team player. The threat was clear. Maya could push back and be labeled as a problem employee, or she could swallow this quietly. She left Richard's office shaking with anger. She'd been outmaneuvered by someone who knew exactly how corporate politics worked, who understood that power mattered more than merit. That night, Maya made a decision. She contacted her lawyer. The board meeting was scheduled for the following Wednesday. Richard had been preparing all week, refining his presentation, building allies, positioning himself as the visionary who would save Apex Innovations. What Richard didn't know was that Maya had spent the same week preparing very differently. Her lawyer had contacted Apex's board chairman, requesting an emergency shareholder meeting to coincide with the strategic presentation. As the majority owner, Maya had the right to call such meetings. The board, confused but legally obligated to comply, had agreed. On Tuesday evening, Maya sent a company-wide email. All Apex employees are invited to attend tomorrow's board meeting as observers. The meeting will be in the large conference room at 2 p.m. Your attendance is optional, but encouraged. Richard, seeing the email, immediately called her. What are you doing? Board meetings aren't open to general staff. As a shareholder, I have the right to invite observers, Maya said calmly. I think transparency would be good for company morale. Shareholder? Maya, you don't own shares in this company. See you tomorrow, Richard. Wednesday arrived. The large conference room was set up with the 6 board members at the main table. Richard sat confidently at the presentation position, his slides loaded, but the room was unusually full. At least 20 employees had taken Maya up on her invitation, lining the walls as observers. Sophie was there, along with most of the product team. The board chairman, David Kowalski, a seasoned investor in his 60s, called the meeting to order. We have an unusual situation today, David said. We'll be hearing Richard's strategic presentation, but first we have a shareholder matter to address. Maya Chen has requested to make a statement. Richard's head snapped toward Maya, who stood from her seat along the wall. His expression flickered, confusion, then irritation. With all due respect, Richard said, Maya is a junior analyst. She's not a shareholder. I'm not sure why we're... Actually, David interrupted, consulting his notes. Ms. Chen is our majority shareholder. She owns 52% of Apex Innovations through Cascade Holdings, LLC. The room went silent. Every person turned to look at Maya. Richard's face drained of color. That's... What? Richard stammered. Maya walked to the front of the room, her worn leather notebook in hand. She was terrified, but she'd prepared for this moment. 6 months ago, she began, her voice steady, I purchased a controlling stake in this company. The purchase agreement allowed me to observe operations anonymously for up to 1 year before revealing my identity. I chose to join as a junior employee to understand Apex from the ground up, to see how we operate, where our problems are, and who our people are. She turned to Richard. 3 weeks ago, I identified a strategic opportunity. I spent a weekend developing a comprehensive pivot proposal focused on the medical research market. I presented it to Richard Thornton, my supervisor, through proper channels. Richard was staring at her, his mouth slightly open. Richard dismissed my idea publicly without reviewing it. I then sent him my complete proposal via email, 30 pages of market analysis, financial projections, customer interviews, and implementation roadmaps. He never responded. But this week, Richard announced he would present a strategic pivot to this board. His pivot was my proposal, nearly word for word, with my name removed. She placed a printed document on the table. This is my original proposal, time-stamped and emailed to Richard last Friday. I believe you'll find it matches what Richard planned to present today. David picked up the document, flipping through it. Other board members leaned in to look. The room was dead silent except for the sound of turning pages. Richard found his voice. This is absurd. Maya, if you're actually a shareholder, which I find hard to believe. I have documentation, David said quietly, still reading. She is indeed our majority owner. Then this is entrapment, Richard's voice rose. You don't get to hide your identity, pretend to be a junior employee, and then spring this on people. It's unethical. Maya kept her composure. I wanted to see this company honestly, and what I saw was a culture where ideas matter less than hierarchy, where junior people can have their work stolen without recourse, where someone like you, Richard, can dismiss someone out of hand because you assume they have nothing valuable to contribute. I didn't steal anything. I developed a strategy informed by various. You took my exact work and claimed it as your own, Maya said, her voice harder now. You told me to my face that I didn't understand how corporations work, that I needed to know my place. You threatened me when I confronted you. Sophie spoke up from the back of the room. I was in the meeting when Maya first mentioned the medical pivot. Richard shut her down without even listening. Richard spun toward Sophie. You're out of line. No, David said firmly. She's not. Maya, did you bring the email thread? Maya had her laptop ready. She projected the emails on the screen. Her proposal sent Friday at 6:47 p.m. Richard's read receipt Friday at 7:12 p.m. No response. Then Maya's follow-up Monday morning. Richard's reply, I'll review when I have time. Then, side by side on the screen, Maya's proposal, dated and time-stamped, next to Richard's presentation. The similarities were undeniable. The market analysis, the revenue projections, even specific phrases, it was the same work. One of the board members, a woman named Patricia, spoke. Richard, this is pretty damning. Richard was sweating now. Look, Maya's data contributed to my thinking. I synthesized multiple sources. Stop, David said. Just stop. We can all see what happened here. Richard's shoulders slumped. The fight went out of him. He'd been caught, completely and undeniably. I need to understand something, David said, turning to Maya. Why did you handle it this way? You could have revealed yourself immediately and forced the issue. Why go through all this? Maya took a breath. Because I wanted to know if this company was worth saving, not just financially, culturally. I wanted to see if people here valued ideas over egos, merit over politics. What I found was mixed. There are people here like Sophie who do incredible work and care deeply about doing the right thing. But there are also people who've built careers on taking credit and playing power games. She looked at Richard. I didn't want to be the owner who rules by authority. I wanted to be someone who earns respect. But Richard made that impossible. David nodded slowly. What do you want to do now? I want to implement this pivot. I want Richard to step down from his position. And I want to build a culture where ideas can come from anywhere, where people are judged by their contributions, not their titles. Richard stood abruptly. You can't just fire me in front of everyone. I have a contract. I have rights. You do, Maya agreed, and we'll honor your severance package. But your time at Apex is done. Richard looked around the room, at the board members who wouldn't meet his eyes, at the employees who'd watched him be exposed, at Maya who stood calmly at the front. This isn't over, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He grabbed his laptop and walked out, the door closing behind him with a soft click. The following Monday, Maya addressed the entire company, not as a junior analyst, but as their majority owner and new CEO. I know the last few days have been shocking, she began, standing in front of about 60 employees gathered in the main workspace. I owe you all an explanation and an apology. I came here under false pretenses because I wanted to understand this company from the inside. That wasn't entirely fair to you. She paused, choosing her words carefully. What I found was a company with incredible potential being held back by fear and politics. We've been so worried about failing that we stopped taking risks. We've been so focused on hierarchy that we stopped listening to good ideas regardless of where they came from. Richard Thornton represented the worst of that culture, but he didn't create it alone. We all participated in it. I'm not here to purge people or blame anyone. I'm here to ask, do you want to build something better? Over the next 3 months, Maya led Apex through its transformation. The medical research pivot proved even more successful than her projections suggested. Within 6 weeks of launching their rebranded platform, Clinical Flow, they'd signed contracts with 4 major research institutions. Within 3 months, they had 22 clients and a waiting list. But Maya's changes went deeper than strategy. She restructured the company around ideas, not hierarchy. She instituted Pitch Fridays, where anyone could present a concept, regardless of their position. She made salaries transparent to eliminate negotiation inequities. She created a profit-sharing program so everyone benefited from success. She also did something unexpected with Richard Thornton. 6 weeks after his departure, Maya reached out to him. They met at a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. Richard looked diminished, his confidence replaced with guarded wariness. I'm not here to gloat, Maya said. I wanted to talk because I've been thinking about what happened. I imagine you're pretty satisfied, Richard said bitterly. Actually, no, I keep thinking about the fact that you're smart and experienced. You really do understand enterprise software. But somewhere along the way, you decided that protecting your position mattered more than doing good work. Richard was quiet for a long moment. Do you know what it's like to spend 15 years building a career and still feel like you're one mistake away from losing everything? No, Maya admitted. I was lucky. I inherited money I didn't earn. That's not lost on me. I saw you as a threat, Richard said. Some kid from Stanford, eager and smart, probably willing to work twice as hard for half the recognition. I've watched people like you replace people like me for years. So yes, when you had a good idea, my instinct was to take it, to prove I was still valuable. That's honest, Maya said. I'm not asking for my job back. I know, but I want to offer you something else, a consulting role, part-time. We need someone who understands enterprise sales and implementation, someone who's made mistakes and learned from them, if you're interested. Richard looked at her genuinely surprised. After what I did? You made a choice based on fear. I want to build a company where people don't have to make those choices, where there's enough success to go around, but that only works if people are willing to change. Are you? Richard considered this. I don't know if I deserve that kind of grace. Probably not, Maya said with a slight smile. But I'm not interested in what people deserve. I'm interested in what builds the best company. Richard took the consulting role. He worked with Maya to refine their enterprise sales process, bringing his experience to bear without the desperation that had driven his earlier behavior. It wasn't perfect. Old habits surfaced sometimes, but he was genuinely trying. Sophie was promoted to Chief Product Officer. The employee who'd suggested the transparent salary policy was made head of people operations. A quiet developer who'd been at Apex for 4 years but never spoke in meetings became the lead architect for their AI engine after Maya noticed his brilliant code contributions. 1 year after Maya's revelation in the boardroom, Apex Innovations was profitable for the first time. Clinical Flow was being used in clinical trials across 3 continents. The company had grown from 60 to 95 employees, and most importantly, the culture had transformed. Maya kept her worn leather notebook on her desk as a reminder. Inside the front cover, she had written a quote from her grandmother. "Money opens doors. How you walk through them defines who you are." The board meeting where it all changed became legendary in the company, a story told to new hires as an example of what Apex valued: truth over politics, ideas over hierarchy, growth over ego. Richard Thornton eventually moved on to start his own consulting firm, helping other executives navigate leadership challenges. He often told his clients about the junior analyst who turned out to be the boss and what she'd taught him about the difference between authority and leadership. And Maya? She remained CEO, but she never forgot what it felt like to be underestimated, dismissed, and stolen from. Every time she interviewed a new employee, she looked for the spark of someone with a good idea and no platform to share it. She built a company where those people could thrive. Because that, she learned, was the only kind of company worth building. Would you have revealed your ownership immediately, or would you have tried to work through proper channels first? The story of Apex Innovations reminds us that titles don't equal value, and hierarchy shouldn't silence good ideas. Sometimes the person with the least authority in the room has the most important perspective. What we learn from this story is that true power isn't about the title on your business card or your position in the hierarchy, but about having the courage to contribute your best ideas, regardless of your rank, the wisdom to recognize talent wherever it appears, and the grace to lift others up even when you have every right to tear them down, because the strongest leaders don't need to prove their authority. They earn loyalty by creating spaces where everyone's genius can shine. If you enjoyed this story of corporate justice and transformation, please consider subscribing to my channel. I create narratives about power, redemption, and the moments that define who we really are. Your support means everything. Thank you for being part of this journey.